These two bottles of wine are not the same kind of wine. In fact, one of these is made from a white grape and the other is made from a red grape. And I bet you can't guess which one is which. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of rosé and orange wine, and we're going to be unpacking what the differences between these two are and the similarities as well, because there's a number of those. We're going to be trying these and talking about the deep history behind these different types of winemaking. So if I asked you between these two bottles here, which one is made from a red grape and which one is made from a white grape, you might guess that this one here is made from a red grape because it's darker, and this one maybe is made from a white grape, but you'd be wrong. This bottle here is a rosé made from a grape called Grenache, and this bottle here is a white wine technically, made in an orange wine style with a number of different grapes, including Pinot Grigio, Gewürztraminer, and some ancient grapes that we'll talk about in a little bit. But before we do that, let's unpack what is rosé and what is orange wine. So to sum it up simply, rosé is made from red grapes, but when the grapes are crushed, the skins don't spend much time sitting with the juice. If the skins sit with the juice for a long period of time, that's what makes red wine. But when the skins have just a few hours to macerate or sit on the juice, that's what makes a rosé wine. So it gets a little bit of that complexity and flavors from the skins, but without being a full-on red wine. Orange wine is almost the same thing, but it's made with white grapes instead. Typically in white wine making, the grapes are pressed, the skins are removed, and then the wine is made with just the white grape juice. But with an orange wine, the skins are allowed to sit on the juice just like a rosé or a red wine. And typically the skins will sit longer than a rosé, it will be more like a red wine style. But as the skins sit with the juice, the wine gets some additional color. It also gets some compounds like phenolics, which is what typically gives red wine its tannin. So sometimes when you drink orange wine, it'll have a little bit of that bitterness or drying effect like you would expect in a red wine. And it's just a really complex style of winemaking. It's different than what you would get from a typical white wine. But these wine styles, although they might seem popular and trendy now, are not new in the grand scheme of winemaking. Rosé gets a lot of its history from the Mediterranean and France. And experts tend to think that rosé was sort of an accidental winemaking style. Winemaking many thousands of years ago was less precise, and so sometimes when winemakers were trying to make red wine, they wouldn't leave the skins on long enough and it would end up turning into rosé. But the most popular region for rosé historically and today is probably Provence, France, which gets linked with the rosé style pretty early on in history. Provence rosés tend to be lighter, less pigmented rosés, but rosé can be made in a number of different styles. Rosé wasn't a super popular style in the United States, however, until the 1970s Sutter Home White Zinfandel mistake. They ended up getting a fermentation that was basically stuck. And so the yeast weren't eating all the sugar and it ended up being pretty sweet. So they accidentally created the wine that is now known as White Zinfandel. And it became massively popular, especially among people who were not super serious wine drinkers. It took over America with a craze. And its lasting impact on the rosé wine market is that sometimes people still associate rosé with being a sweet wine, but that's typically not the case. Rosé is often made in a dry style, and rosé can be made as a really serious wine with lots of complex tasting notes. But it's still often associated with being a sweet poolside wine that's not that serious, which is unfortunate because really complex rosés are amazing. And orange wine is something that has recently become pretty popular because it's gotten swept up as being part of the whole natural wine movement. Even though many orange wines are technically not natural wines, they just fall into a category of something that's a little bit different than what people have seen on the market before. But it's not a new style of winemaking. In fact, orange wine is probably one of the oldest styles of winemaking that dates all the way back to the country of Georgia over 8,000 years ago, where they were making wine in giant clay pots called quervi that they put into the ground. And orange wine was one of the styles of wine that they were making. But as far as American wine drinking goes, it just recently became pretty popular, so it's easier to find on the market. Similar to rosé, the longer the juice spends time with the grape skins, the deeper the color is going to be, and the more structure through tannins, some additional flavors, and texture the wine is going to have. And so this one here looks like it's a pretty deep orange wine. But to truly understand the differences behind these two styles of winemaking, let's open up these bottles and do a side-by-side comparison. So this first bottle here is the Stolpman 2024 Grenache Rosé from their Love You Bunches line, which I just think is so cute. And this is one of my go-to easy drinking summer rosé wines. So I know I love this one, but let's give it a taste. Grenache is one of the most popular grapes used in rosé wine. And it often has a nice mix of fresh, fruity, citrus, berry notes alongside some floral notes sometimes. But I also think this one here is just such a pretty color. And usually when I do these tastings, I will taste one and then the other, but I'm actually going to pour these two side by side today so we can compare the colors and flavors one after the other. So our second bottle here is the Stolpman Orange wine, also from the Love You Bunches line. This one is from 2023, and this is their fourth year of making an orange wine. And the grapes are mostly Pinot Gris and a grape called Tocai Friulano, in addition to Gewürztraminer and some orange muscat. But let's talk about Tocai Friulano for a minute. So Tocai Friulano, or more often referred to as just Friulano today to distance itself from the Tocai wine, which is a sweet, historic wine from the Tocai region in Hungary. It's thought that this grape is originally from the Friuli region of Italy. It was also planted widely in Slovenia, but it kind of fell out of favor and found a new home in Chile, where it was called Sauvignonasse, which literally translates to Sauvignon-like, because when they planted it, they weren't sure what it was, but they thought it kind of looked like Sauvignon Blanc. It actually has no relation to Sauvignon Blanc, but the name stuck with it. It's also sometimes known as Sauvignon Vert, but when used in a white blend like in this orange wine, it can add some additional texture. And so because this wine has a blend of 4 different grapes, you're going to get some different things from each of the grapes. The Pinot Gris is going to add some texture, depth of color, and some flavor. The orange muscat's going to add probably some orange blossom or peachy notes to it. The Friulano is really going to add that texture and body, and then the Gewürztraminer is going to add a little bit of a floral note. So I'm really excited to try this one as well. But first, let's do a little side-by-side visual comparison. So when you see these two wines here side-by-side in the glasses, you'll see that this one, this orange wine, is actually a lot darker, and it's a little bit cloudier because it's an unfiltered wine versus this rosé that is filtered. Both of these wines undergo carbonic maceration, which is basically where there is a lack of oxygen that comes into contact with the grapes as they are undergoing some fermentation. And so carbonic maceration can be used in a lot of different wine styles. It's probably most famously associated with Beaujolais, light or red wine styles. It's pretty popular right now. But one of the big differences I mentioned before is how long these wines sit with the grape skins, which also contributes to their color. So this rosé here, and we can see how pale this one is, sits with the skins for just 12 to 24 hours before the skins are removed and the winemaking continues, compared to this orange wine here, which sits with the skins for about 7 days. And so that will also explain why this one is so much darker. But to fully understand these wines, let's give them a taste. So this one here is just delicious. I mentioned before I love this rosé, but it's got notes of strawberry, watermelon, some raspberry, and it's got such bright acidity. It's got almost like a lemon flavor that comes through on it too. This is so perfect on a warm day. It's making me wish it was summer. It's a lighter style of rosé, so it's really easy to enjoy on its own without needing food, but I would definitely pair this with a salmon salad, some light chicken, or any sort of picnic food. This orange wine here, though, on initial aromas, I'm just getting so much peach jumping out at me. Peach and orange blossom in the glass. Oh, so the acid is definitely there on the palate, but it's more of a grapefruit citrus versus the lemon citrus that we had in the rosé. This one here is pretty tropical tasting though. There's some pineapple. There's really juicy, overripe peach. There is a little bit of phenolic bitterness here that adds an extra layer of texture and depth. It's not a bad thing. It's almost like a peach pit. Not quite full on tannin, but it does add to the complexity of this wine. And so with this orange wine, I'm enjoying it on its own, but I think that this one is more of a food wine because it has those extra layers, because it has that additional complexity beyond the rosé here. The funny thing about orange wines is I always say they are white wines for red wine people because of the different layers of complexity, the texture, sometimes a little bit of tannin. They're less easy drinking typically, so they feel more like a red wine experience than something like a rosé, which is more comparable to a lighter white wine typically. So even though these wines have a similar winemaking style and both have some deep history beyond them, they drink so differently. So let me know in the comments, are you team orange wine or team rosé? And if you found this video interesting, be sure to hit that like button, follow along, and come back next week for another video. So until next time, cheers!